Tepoztlán, Mexico. I didn't investigate the details of the retreat as much as I should have, or I might have backed out. I didn't read the fine print. If I had, I would have learned that the Tantra Festival Mexico was all about using sexuality for spiritual growth. It promised workshops, meditations, ceremonies, and rituals, things that, despite living in Asheville, North Carolina, I had no experience with. Lucky for me, I stayed blissfully unaware, booked my reservation for the retreat along with my flight, adding on an additional 5 days to explore the town on my own. The experience was, in a word, life-changing. Tepoztlán, a spiritual town, felt like it had popped out of some magical tale. The town was unlike any I had ever been to. It featured winding and impossibly narrow cobblestone streets weaving through adobe buildings, hugged by the imposing Tepoztlán mountains. You could see the top of the mountain from every part of town, gazing up at any moment to see old peaks mimicking wise guardians, looking down at you, almost as though they were protecting you. The town held an otherworldly vibe. Every day I would stand on, walk on, and meditate on land that felt serene, promising renewal by its very existence. Despite living in the South, I was unprepared for how helpful the people were. When Google Maps failed me, I used Google Translate to stop a young woman and ask for directions. She didn't just give me the directions, she delivered me to my final destination. I couldn't ask a dumb question. All my questions seemed to make perfect sense to everyone. My Spanish can only be described as a work in progress. Despite this severe limitation, I was able to navigate with little difficulty, discovering little nooks as my confidence in my new surroundings grew. And so, amidst this natural wonder and cultural splendor, my journey of self-discovery kicked off. I can honestly say that the Tantra Festival itself saved my life. For the first time in my life, I focused 100% on my thoughts, my feelings, my spirit, and my body. From the moment I arrived, it was almost sensory overload. The first day began with an intention-setting ceremony. The facilitators walked us through the schedule of events and had us set our intention for the 5-day retreat. I was honest with myself. I just wanted to stop feeling lost. Day 2 started with sunrise yoga and silent meditation. At first, the quiet was unnerving. I'm used to sirens, sounds of the cars on the road, sounds of people talking. Those familiar sounds were replaced by the soft rustle of the wind and birds chirping. After some time, I started to hear the different types of birds, the insects buzzing around me, and the leaves blowing in the wind. I stopped trying to identify what I was hearing and just focused on listening while feeling my temperature rise as the sun rose. The sound of a bell alerted us to the end of the ceremony, and we all were invited to rise at our leisure and prepare for our next activity, which was a Temazcal ceremony. An hour and a half later, we arrived at the mud structure where we would participate in the ceremony. Outside of the structure were volcanic rocks roasting in a fire pit, with red sparks crackling loudly. This ceremony, we were advised, was one where we had the option to participate in with mushrooms. We were offered a penis envy mushroom, named for the shape of the mushroom, which is a variety of mushrooms that contain the psychedelic compound psilocybin. I was a little concerned about legality, but it turns out that while psilocybin is technically illegal in Mexico, it was accepted as part of certain indigenous ceremonies for their traditional and spiritual significance. As the Temazcal is a ceremony that is centuries old, in this context, we weren't breaking any rules. This was a question for me. I'd never taken any kind of mind-altering substances. I'd never smoked a cigarette or marijuana, and the closest I would probably get to any kind of altering substance was alcohol. I can't say exactly why I chose to partake in the ceremony with mushrooms, other than I had a sense that my mind wasn't going to give me the answers I was looking for. without help. Since I was here, I was going all in. I ingested the small square of chocolate and walked to the circle of women that was forming outside of the Temazcal womb. Our Temazcalera started by asking us to choose an animal from the figurines that we felt connected to. The psilocybin must have kicked in because the jaguar seemed to be calling to me. She instructed us to blow into the figurines, and what emerged was a cacophony of sounds uniquely tuned to the strength of our breath. We spent the next 5 minutes calling out to our spiritual animals as our Temazcalera moved in a slow circle, her hands steady as she waved the smoky nopal, wrapping us in its earthy scent. When she was finished, she invited us each to the opening of the womb, asking us to place our hands on the entrance as we requested entry into the sacred space. Inside the womb, we sat in a circle around the hot volcanic rocks that had been moved inside. Our Temazcalera closed the door to the chamber, reached into the bucket, curled her fingers around the sprigs of rosemary and other herbs, lifted her hands high, and let the droplets fall before swinging her arm, flinging the water onto the hot volcanic rocks. A fierce hiss erupted as the steam rose, filling the chamber while carrying the sharp, earthy fragrance of the soaked herbs into the air around us. It was both a physical and spiritual experience. I had no doubt that I expelled any and every toxin living in my body. The heat at times felt unbearable. At the same time, the steam obscured my view of the other participants, and I felt very much like I was in a mother's womb. At the same time, inside that womb of mud and concrete, I experienced a period of great clarity. Whether it is true or not, I don't believe that I ever felt safe in my mother's womb. When I think about my birth, I envision a process by which I am trying to get out and find a safe space. I can't imagine my mother talking to me on my journey. I don't believe she excitedly waited for my arrival, dreamed about who I might be, or planned to guide me at any point in the process. It was this core belief that became the lens by which I viewed myself. Here, but unwanted. Here, but unprotected. Here, but unloved. In the thickness of the steam, I began to see myself clearly, as though I were looking in a mirror. The image in the mirror spoke truth to me. That belief was the crutch that prevented me from living. Unwanted, unprotected, and unloved at physical birth did not have to mean always unwanted, unprotected, and unloved. I could choose to emerge from this earthly womb, consciously shed that identity, and embrace my rebirth. I could wrap myself around the love and acceptance that I felt in that gathering and start a new life of my own design. I started to cry, bawl really. Part of me felt gratified for this newfound understanding, and part of me mourned the wasted years of anger and pain. Still another part of me was scared to let go of an identity that had been a part of my life for so long. At the conclusion of the ceremony, our guide asked each of us what we were ready to release and what we were calling in, moving forward. I wanted to say something profound. I wanted to at least think something profound, but my mind was blank. It felt like I had just learned to do addition and was being asked to solve a calculus problem. I had no idea. I felt like the ceremony revealed the answer to the "what is your problem?" question, but the answer to "how do you fix it?" still eluded me. As the sun sank behind the mountains, casting the sky in amber and violet, we gathered once more, emerging from quiet reflection to continue our healing journey with Jaguar Wamban, a multi-dimensional healing artist and founder of Wamba Nation. Jaguar's role was to guide us through a womb healing and steaming ceremony and educate us on how and when we could utilize this practice to both heal and maintain the new sense of self. She began by explaining that womb healing is a sacred practice rooted in ancient traditions designed to help womb-bearing women reconnect with their bodies, release emotional blockages, and restore balance to the sacral energy center. Our ceremony would blend energetic healing with physical cleansing to create a deeply nourishing experience for both the body and spirit. The ceremony began on a dimly lit outdoor terrace, the air thick with the scent of burning copal. Soft music set a meditative tone as we worked together in quietly arranging flowers, crystals, and ancestral symbols to build the altar. One by one, we placed our offerings with intention to honor the divine feminine energy as Jaguar guided us into the sacred space. She began by connecting with each of us, placing her hands over our wombs, and explaining that her goal was to channel warmth and energy to clear stagnant emotions, past traumas, and stress stored in the body. She encouraged us to breathe deeply and envision a bright light filling our sacral spaces to bring healing and renewal. Then, within the safe space of the circle, we shared our stories with the goal of releasing generational wounds and embracing self-love. As I listened to the stories and prepared to tell my own, I could see a pattern emerging. There was a common theme of a wrong that had been done to us. The pain and the trauma stemmed from an outside source. That recognition led me to the answers that had eluded me that morning. I was looking to release the power that people, their actions, and outside circumstances had over me. I was calling in an environment that would allow me to practice being the new me until the environment no longer mattered. When it came time to tell my story, I declined the opportunity to tell my story of trauma. I told my fellow participants that the story I would have told was the story of another me. But that day, at that moment, I rejected that old story and I was ready to tell a new story. A story that I would have to write and that began with our Temazcal that morning. They would be a part of my new story of self-discovery, self-acceptance, and self-love. Our ceremony ended with a final meditation inviting gratitude and intention setting for continued healing. For the balance of the retreat, I would participate in cacao ceremonies, sunrise yoga, guided meditations, and healing music sessions. It was nothing short of transformative. With the time and space to think, I understood that I'd spent my entire life reacting to my mother. In response to her multitude of fleeting relationships, I never trusted anyone enough to form a lasting bond. As a therapist, I understood my behavior perfectly. That understanding did little to help me. I was trapped in a prison of my own making. I watched my mother throw herself wholeheartedly into relationship after relationship, marriage after marriage, falling in love with the one over and over again, producing children along the way with seemingly no regard for the broken homes these children would have no choice but to experience. In my early years, subconsciously, and then my later years, consciously, I became my mother's opposite. Where it seems there is no one she won't marry, I never found anyone who met my criteria for marriage or even a long-term relationship. If I'm being honest, as I have aged, I too have found myself influenced by a younger generation that doesn't consider marriage important. Like many of my younger sisters, I sometimes wonder, what is the purpose of a romantic relationship? Kids and marriage are not goals for me. I've not seen evidence that a piece of paper symbolizing commitment has any impact on whether the two parties will actually remain committed to the relationship. My mother taught me that. I didn't want to jump or hop from one person to another. But somewhere on my path, I equated relationships with others as the way I should know myself, define myself. My fear of relationships also created an almost impenetrable wall of doubt that prevented me from even exploring who Jade Mitchell was. This truth became crystal clear during the retreat. For 5 days, I had a chance to glimpse at the other side of the wall. I consciously let go of being who I was and focused on discovering who I wanted to be.